We've all seen the videos that show that Marshall's studio line of amps, the Studio Vintage 20, the Studio Classic 20, and so on, sound great. But how well do they really keep up? Let's find out. That was my Marshall Studio Vintage 20. It's a 20-watt recreation of those classic non-master volume amps Marshall released in the late 60s. Some people call them the Plexis. I call this my baby Plexi. Obviously, these amps sound great, but at just 20 watts, how well is it really going to keep up? I decided to do a little experiment and find out. I've got a few other Marshalls over in my live room. These are 100-watt Marshalls. And even with master volumes, you've still got to crank them to get some good tone happening. Now, I generally set mine between 4 and 6 on the master volume. So I thought it might be fun to compare those amps set how I would normally set them for good recording and live tone with the actual volume of the Studio Vintage 20. Now, as is the case with most Plexi-style amps, you got to crank it to get it to sound good. I've got the inputs jumped. I've got both master volumes set on 6. I have the tone controls dimed all the way to 10, and I have the presence set at 6. The other Marshalls have their tone controls set variously, however they sound good, and the master volumes are between 4 and 6. So they're cooking pretty good. For this comparison, I'm going to be switching between my Studio Vintage 20 and my Vintage Modern 100-watt head, my JVM 410H, and my Silver Jubilee. All my amps and cabs are running through a KHE ACS 8x4 amp cab switcher. And for this comparison, I'll be using a 412 loaded with Celestion EVH 12-inch speakers, basically 30-watt greenbacks. The cab's mic'd with an SM57, an older Sennheiser 421 U5 revision, an SE Electronics VR1 ribbon microphone, and a vintage 67 condenser mic from JZ Microphones. I use all these microphones because I like the way that they fill out the sound. If you'd like to see a video of how and where I'm using all these mics, let me know in the comments below. Now, I've got these mics running into one of my Universal Audio Apollo interfaces, and in the console software, I'm coming out of one of the auxes into a channel in Logic where I'm recording this. So what you're hearing is the mic's blended into one channel, and nothing changes from amp to amp. Now, for full disclosure, I've got a couple pedals in front of all of these amps. I've got a Boss 7-band EQ pedal. I've got 200 hertz pulled out just 1 or 2 dB, and I have 800 hertz boosted 1 or 2 dB. I've also got an EP Booster from Xotic Effects. Okay, I'm going to start with my Vintage Modern. Again, it's a 100-watt amp. I've got it set for a nice, kind of chunky Warren Haynes-ish tone. The master volume is about 6. I'm going to go now to my Silver Jubilee. I believe this one is also right around 6 on the master. And finally, this is my JVM 410H. I'm on the OD1 channel. It's in the orange mode. The channel volume is at about 6, and the master volume is right about 4. All right, so we see these all have roughly the same volume. I'm going to switch now to the Studio Vintage 20. I haven't changed anything, not changing mic levels or anything. Okay, so now I want to kind of play the same riff, and I'll switch between the amps. First will be the Studio Vintage 20, then I'll go to my Silver Jubilee, then I'll go to the Vintage Modern, and finally I'll end up on the JVM 410H. So as you can see, there's not a whole lot of difference in volume at all. Once again, the mics, I didn't change a thing. I didn't change the gain. I didn't change fader position, nothing. I just switched between the amps. So what you're hearing was the relative volume as the mics picked it up between those 4 amps. Now, where you probably will hear a difference is in the more chunky, low-endy kind of stuff. With 20 watts, you don't have that headroom. And that's where those extra watts really come in handy on a 100-watt Marshall. That said, though, the Studio Vintage 20 actually fares surprisingly well, even in that regard. So there you have it. I think all things considered, the Studio Vintage 20 does a great job. If you've played a 100-watt Marshall, then you know setting the volume at anywhere from 4 to 6 is loud. God knows it's louder than I can get away with being at pretty much any of the venues that I play. That's why I use the Kemper Live. But up against them with the same mic levels, the SV20 held its own and sounded great. But I want to hear what you think. Did the SV20 hold its own, or was it just outmatched by its 100-watt bigger, badder brothers? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.